I used to literally think that in general, there was a racist element to policies that were right of center, and there was an empathetic or humane bent to the policies left of center. I legitimately thought that. And I believe most of my smart liberal friends literally believe this. And I'm simply here to try to gently say, I don't know that it's working. And I think that most of my liberal friends, if they saw the data, they would say, oh my God, I thought I was on the right side of history.
Forged in America. Forged in America.
Okay, you're about to see the true preparation.
Tom,
Okay,
have you known that Ravin was born to do this? Like it's a
Let me
calling.
tell. Hey, listen, movie producer, director, screenwriter.
I'm not even want to say anything else because
We're gonna keep that in. Don't worry.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Oh, we said 20, right? 20.
Yeah.
20 episode 20.
Okay. Welcome to episode 20 of Forged in America. As always, I'm Ravin Gandhi with my buddy Al Goldstein, and we are both entrepreneurs who have built and sold businesses, who also never thought we would get to episode 20. And to celebrate episode 20, we have our very close friend, Tom Gimbel, as our third bestie for the day. Tom is an amazing entrepreneur. From scratch, he built a very big, nationally known staffing company called LaSalle, up to north of $100 million, all by himself, sold it in an amazing exit to private equity, ran that business on behalf of the PE firm, left about 2 years ago, went into a psychological crisis like Al and I have. So welcome, Tom Gimbel to Fortune America.
Good to be with you, boys. Thanks for having me.
Well, Tommy, I guess you've found yourself in the middle of our poor man's all in here, and I guess you're auditioning for the part of JCal, the self-proclaimed.
Oh, you're already starting there?
That's what I get.
Self-proclaimed moderate, but way funnier than the two of us.
Oh, self-proclaimed moderate. You know what? I'll take that. You know what? Somebody told me once, Al, if your far right friends think you're far left and your far left friends think you're far right, you're probably right in the right place.
Well, I think I've often described myself as a centrist. If you balance my social views with my fiscal and foreign policy views,
At
kinda
least,
like
at least when you're around Anna, that's how you're viewed.
I just want the listeners to know that today I am going to be the child for whom these two are going to be fighting over custody. Because I have been politically very close to Gimbel in the past. I've moved right of center.
Oh, you were farther left than me. Let me tell you, my
I was
friend.
farther left than you, and we know this, and Tom knows this very well because my company used to engage a division of LaSalle for PR. And so they would sometimes get me on CNN or CNBC, and it was always to go on and bash Trump. So I've got my bona fides here,
Right.
but I want to give this PSA because as we move through the topics today, I want people to understand that today is going to be a good episode because you're going to see an element of what's happening in the country today from a polarization perspective.
And Tom and I have been friends for 20 years, and to me, the beauty of having this kind of dialogue is that you can debate people, and over time, change your mind. And I aspire to be able to change my mind sometimes, which I'm not sure I practice as often as I preach.
Yeah, I think never is the frequency with which we've seen this thus far. And Gimbel, I think you can back me up on that one. Okay, first thing that we're putting up on the screen is we have two images. The top one is the before and after of the Ayatollah's residence. America and Israel have leveled that. They've taken off, I think, the top 4 dozen leaders in Iran. The intelligence has been absolutely insane. Below that is an image of Maduro from Venezuela and the Ayatollah. And the point here is fear the superpower because America has great intelligence. On the flip side, here is what I think a lot of people are saying, which is it's very simple. If this attack on Iran is another quick, successful operation like the nuclear strikes in Maduro, Trump will get away with it. If it's dragged out into a legitimate war or another post-regime change disaster, Trump is done and JD Vance will be as well. And the last thing that I'm going to put on the screen here, Steve Witkoff basically went all around the media today to justify the actions. And they said in that first meeting with Iran, the Iranian negotiator said to us with no shame, they controlled 460 kilos of 60% enriched uranium, and they could make potentially 11 nuclear bombs. So the framing here is Trump is at an all-time low from a political strength perspective. Right now, you've got well north of 80% chance that he loses the House. He is now, I believe, at a 45, 43, 45% chance of losing the Senate. Polymarket says there's a 40% chance he loses both houses of Congress. So, Tom, give us your thoughts.
Well, I think number one, bad guy in Iran. I think we can argue. You can argue both sides of this for forever. Of why now? Why is it happening? Why did he say during the campaign he wouldn't go in and start wars? I think you can hate the person and like the policies. Al and I have had this conversation ad nauseum, and I firmly agree with that. You know, I always start with, where were all the protesters that were for Palestine and in Gaza? Where were they for the Iranian people? You know, I think we have two sides of political on the MAGA side. We've got two sides on the progressives. Everybody's full of you know what.
Do either of you think that there is a wag the dog political element to this, that Trump knew that he was kind of weakened politically, and if he could choose between doing this operation now and say 6 months from now or 6 months ago, Gimbel, you've put any legitimacy into that?
I mean, I think that's been going on since Christ was a kid, right? I mean, I think everybody says that about every politician, that every president that's done this, going back to Clinton, Bush, Obama. They've all done strikes without congressional authorization. And I think that's just what it is. The interesting thing that I read the other day was, did they do Maduro in Venezuela to control that oil supply, knowing they were going to do this?
Hey, so Al, what do you think about this theory that I also buy into, which is if I can take out the oil in Venezuela and I can take out the oil in Iran, which together is north of 20% of the energy that China imports, he is basically kind of looking at Xi Jinping from like a new Cold War perspective and saying, look, I can do these things and don't even think about moving on Taiwan.
I want to take a bit of a step back because I think you're framing this from a political standpoint of, is it good for Trump? Is it not good for Trump? And I think the reality is it's much broader and much more geopolitical than that. And Trump, if anything, has been pretty consistent on the fact that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. I think he's been saying it pretty consistently since 2015. He tore up the JCPOA, which was the original Obama nuclear deal, because the reality is that was a terrible deal that was going to lead to Iran having a nuke by basically 2030 or shortly before. They saw an opportunity to basically take out one of the worst people in the history of the world. He saw a path to probably reset the entire Middle East. If and when this works, I believe the regime will fall. There's a key question of what happens next. I think you're going to have an entire kind of complete change of what happens in the Middle East. You're going to have free trade zones between the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Israelis. The crazy thing to me is you're seeing Iranians all over the world kind of rise up and say, thank you to the US, thank you to Israel for what you're doing. And the only people that are kind of coming out and saying this is a terrible idea are far left liberals in the US that are saying, no, like you should support Khamenei and you should let him be free. To me, it's a crazy construct.
So what if 2 points. So you said when he ripped up the accord in his first term that it was a bad deal because they would have had a nuclear bomb by 2030 or 2032. Well, he ripped it up and they were going to have a nuclear bomb by 2027, 2028. So why not have kept that and still had at least some pressure on him, since they're going to, they're telling us that they were going to have a nuclear bomb without the deal. Like, I feel like that's a two-sided coin that we're only getting, oh, they would have gotten one, so we ripped it up. Well, he's getting one with it ripped up. Hold on one second. Either way, that seems to be a conflict for me. The second one is one I have no clue on, and that is, if you don't do a full regime change, who's to say that the third command, fifth in command, 25th in command isn't more radical and worse than this guy? Don't you need to do a full regime change?
Well, I think that there is almost by definition a regime change in that the top 4 dozen leaders in that country are now, are now gone. I will say this: when I went to Israel 4 years ago with Al and a bunch of other guys, I was very open-minded. If anything, I was probably super two-state solution, super sympathetic to the entire, Palestinian Gaza cause because I read so much mainstream media and I felt like I had heard the genocide apartheid claim and I was very kind of sensitive to it because, I was a two-time Obama voter. The thing that I learned when we were over there is just how much of all of the problems that Israel faces are in fact funded by Iran. And like whatever border that you went to, all the money, whether it was Hezbollah, whether it was Hamas, that's coming from Iran. And I was shocked to hear that. And it made me,
Well,
that less sympathetic to Iran. I remember being 6 years old in 1979 when the hostages were taken,
Sure.
and my mom was working second shift in this tool making plant, and it was a very blue collar thing, and they gave all the line workers, of which she was one, jeans with a patch of Ayatollah Khomeini sewn onto the butt, and the idea was everyone could sit on the face of the Ayatollah. Like I literally remember that. And so I have seen this country as a bad actor for so long that I there's just like a patriotic element to me when I do see, to Al's point, the ubiquity of celebration across almost
Agree.
every big American city all
well,
over the world. So I don't know that it's going to end well. I mean, I certainly don't know that.
well, Ravin, just to build on that, you said Iran's been behind all these problems that Israel is facing. I want to say that's too narrow. The reality is, Iran has been behind a lot of the problems the U.S. and the rest of the world have been facing. Because you think about American soldiers killed in Iraq, a lot of that was funded by Iran. All these suicide bombings all over Europe and the rest of the world have been funded by Iran. So there have been thousands of American soldiers that have been killed at their behest. I don't know how many of our listeners know the history of the revolution and when the Ayatollah came into power. But before that, Iran was extremely Western, and we have a lot of Persian friends out there. Have been all these videos of these amazing, kind of like protests of Iranians and everyone else around that are just super excited about this idea of freedom in this country.
Well, so my question for Gimbel is what Al just said is basically some version of every time America has ever taken down any sort of bad guy, of which we've all lived through many. You do have people celebrating in the streets. You do have people talking about, look at how it was before the takeover. So there's that's not too bespoke. It's a very common thing. Do you think, Tom, that one of the reasons that Trump's poly market is so low is because of this disorder and people just feel like it's too much chaos?
Yeah. I think they saw how we exited Afghanistan, and I think people are afraid of one of two things. Either A, going in there and having a never-ending war and troops on the ground, or going in, getting rid of all the military, maybe taking the oil, maybe not 100%, and getting out and leaving a country in complete disarray, and then God only knows what rises up. And I think that's the challenge. And I think it's just more of, whenever it reminds me of Trump saying, we're not going to start any new wars. It's like George Bush saying no new taxes, right? In 91. It's like whenever these guys, or in 89, whenever these guys or women, they put something as a guarantee. You can't run the leading country in the world and know exactly what you're going to do or not going to do for the next 4 years. It's lunacy. But the problem here is he doesn't admit that there's no realization that, okay, I said this wrong. This is why we're doing it. And to explain it, if he had explained things to the American people, there'd be no issue. I really believe
Well,
that.
I think to your point that they have shifted very quickly from no new wars to no endless wars. And so if you see what they're going on around right now, the point is, look, the president does not want an endless war. The president does not want Afghanistan or Iraq. Again, I'm having like a whole patriotic moment where it's like hard for me to feel anything except for like total faith in like what America is doing. And on that regard, I mean, look, we freaking killed it in Venezuela in the sense Maduro's in the southern district of New York right now. There has been no uprising in Venezuela.
Yep.
We're basically in control of that oil.
I, Ravin, on that point, I will tell you. So yesterday I was with a friend, and I'm an investor in his fund, who was telling me about their best investment that I'm in now, which is a fintech in Venezuela. The company is growing like crazy, and it's raising money from the top venture capitalists now. And this was kind of news to me because I was like, well, I wasn't sure. I was like, okay, we took out Maduro, but the regime is still in power. Is something different? He's like, yeah, it's totally different. I've been there. You should go.
Look, where I'm with Al 100% is that I am optimistic about track record. And so far in Venezuela, you have a pretty good track record. Granted, it's very nascent. But if, and this is a giant if, because you're talking about a country of almost 90 million people with very robust defenses, that has been a bad actor for decades. If by a month, 2 months, 3 months, there is some degree of what Al just said for Venezuela in Iran, I think that it is going to be a absolute reversal for this president politically, in the sense of the American people are going to say, wow, maybe it's just that a lot of our former presidents didn't use the military to the same degree where we started with the surgical elements of it, and they didn't get kind of boxed in by the Joint Chiefs saying, let's go spend a whole bunch of money and get Raytheon and Lockheed. And if in fact Trump is just optimizing to kill, which is frankly what I want to happen when we go in to remove bad guys. I don't know. I mean, what do you think, Gimbel?
Yeah, listen, I think nobody wants today looking back in the time machine, right, and saying Korea or Vietnam. And the problem was, right, we didn't have the technology, but we just sent in a ton of young men in there to do this. And now we're going right for the head. And I think that makes a lot of sense in what we're doing. The question, the problem really is for the layperson is we don't know where the truth stops and where everything else begins. And it's like the question I would ask you, Al, and just if you can just answer this one question: is the money from Venezuela, from that oil that we're taking, I always pronounce it, was it Qatar or Qatar? Is it going to an account there, or is it not?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think some of those conspiracy theories, like
I don't think it's a conspiracy theory. The question is it going to a bank there, or is it going to a bank in America? And that's crazy that it's going to a bank in Qatar. I mean, it's crazy.
Is that actually, because I'm so far removed from...
Yes, the oil money is going to a bank in Qatar, not in America, not in Switzerland, not in England. Am I wrong, Al?
I'm actually looking up in real time. We're going to do the Joe Rogan thing before shifting to the U.S. Treasury. Okay, so you're partially correct. So
if it hasn't shifted yet, I'm 100% correct.
February 2026, Energy Secretary Chris Wright confirmed that the funds are being moved out of Qatar into the U.S. Treasury Department account to increase oversight. So again, this is, I think, a bit of the debate that Tom and I always have. There's kind of like one fringe talking point that is partially accurate usually, and that's the debate, versus what I always kind of try to focus on is the broader policy issues and where it's going. Okay, is there a scenario where by 2028, you have a Venezuela that's now integrated into North America and South America and into free trade? Their oil is in the system. You have an Iran that is now part of the Abraham Accords, where the nuclear threat to the rest of the Middle East is no longer there. Maybe Cuba flips and now becomes just another great place. There are all these videos of what Cuba used to look like. Maybe you see an end to the Russian-Ukraine war. And can you imagine, obviously, who knows how it all plays out, but if those facts actually play out over the next couple of years, how different the world will look?
Okay, well, I think a good thing to talk about now is that you've heard kind of both sides of that. I think we can all establish that Trump has his work cut out for him politically as it relates to the midterms. So with that in mind, I think a good topic to talk about is, what do things look like for the Democrats at the moment? Vis-a-vis Al's favorite state, California. This is a tweet from Shamad. The state of California has been run top to bottom by one party since 2011. Here are the results. Highest state income tax, highest rate of poverty, highest rate of unemployment, highest rate of homelessness, highest energy costs, hard to explain this away. Now, why did he tweet about this? Well, obviously, because the front runner on Polymarket is Gavin Newsom, who is the very, very likely nominee of, coming from the left. So, Tommy, if you look at that and you know that that's going to be hung around Newsom's neck like a millstone, his track record in California, how do you, I don't want to use the word defend because I don't want to put words into your mouth, but how would you look at that knowing that, like, we know where Trump's problems are, but how do you make the pro Newsom case knowing that that is his track record?
I don't think Newsom makes it out. I think Newsom's Gary Hart. I think he's a Jeb Bush. I think he's a political establishment want because he fits the Democratic narrative of 6'2", good-looking, Hollywood, governor of the biggest state in the country, yada, yada, yada. And I think he's a lot of hot air. I'm not a Newsom guy. I think.
Who are we thinking?
I'm a Josh Shapiro guy, and it sucks where I've been at a small breakfast with Shapiro, 8, 10 people, and listened to him and talked to him and asked him questions. And listen, a politician's a politician's a politician. Let's just start there. But Shapiro is a guy who came up as a state's attorney, right? As an attorney general. He understands that aspect. He runs a swing state, Pennsylvania, as a Democrat. My only fear is, as it has been since I was born in 72, is where does a Jewish candidate start and stop, and how far can they get, and how does the political left eat their own like I've never seen, right? They always eat their own. And I think he's the most viable candidate for a moderate type of. I saw Ram on it, and I've had lunch with Ram before.
So the question for Al on that, back to conspiracy theory, is, Al, why was Josh Shapiro not picked to be the VP for Kamala? And conspiracy theorists said he's Jewish and Jewish.
Well, I think he said that, right?
I think he didn't want it.
Did he say that?
This is my takeaway was
he wrote.
I think
he wrote that in his book, right or wrong.
Okay, well, there you have it. I didn't know. Again, I'm finding a lot about this. So if Shapiro himself, Gimbel, has said, I was not put on the ticket because I was Jewish.
Well, what he said specifically is that Kamala's handlers thought that he might have been a Mossad agent, which he found offensive.
Did he really? I didn't hear that. Did he really say that, Al?
He wrote that in his book, and he took some heat for it. And, basically because he had at some point, he's Jewish, and at some point he had been in Israel and Birthright. He did some of the strips, and he said he found that offensive and withdrew himself, I believe.
Yeah, I think he didn't want it. I think he knew it wasn't going to be a winning ticket, and I think he knew it would be bad for his career.
Well, okay, so on this point, because I love that Gimbel was not a Newsom guy. So where I want to go with this is Shapiro wasn't picked for VP, right? Well, who did they pick? Obviously, they picked Tim Walz, okay? And I want to show you guys the state of Minnesota under Tim Walz, okay? And in 2018, Tim Walz becomes the governor of Minnesota. And the autism program payments in Minnesota have gone from $1 million to $343 million.
Unbelievable.
So I want to frame this for you, Tommy. Here's the thing. Like, I know this gets under your skin as much as it does ours. Like, what the hell is going on in Minnesota where this guy is the governor? You seem to what has an industrial scale fraud going on, and you don't see outrage about it. And this guy was going to be vice president.
It kills me because the same thing where I'll be the first one to say, oh, I hate the graft going on with the Trump family and they're making money and doing the crypto and all this crap. And it irritates me to no end. But I'm also one to say the Democrats are doing it in a different way to benefit other people, to garner more votes and to do that whole thing. And I think that's a bunch of crap. So when I see something like that, it kills me. It absolutely blows my mind.
Ravin and I did an episode where it was just the two of us talking about policies and issues from both sides we don't like. And one of the big ones on the Republican side for both of us was the grift and the perception of grift and real grift. And I agree with you. It drives me crazy. I think what people don't realize is that you see these numbers from Minnesota. These are transfer payments from the federal government.
100% agree.
Right.
It's just old. It's like, you know what? Sometimes you just don't want it. Chappelle did that Saturday Night Live cold open, right? When he walked out and he said, Trump came out and said, everything you've ever thought is true. And he walks back in. and it's like, it's just the difference of flaunting it in our faces and showing us every day. And I think this is doing the same thing. When you see what's going on here, this is ridiculous, and all of it needs to be canceled.
Well, and so, you also now in Newsom's state, you start to see that there's a tremendous fraud going on in the healthcare space. I know there's a lot of looking now at the hospice industry, and there's just billions and
I
billions
got a
of dollars.
question. Didn't Rick Scott's a Republican in Florida, your favorite state, Al? What didn't Rick Scott have a little bit of problem?
I don't know. Did he?
Let's do a real time. And I'm pretty sure that Rick Scott had some problems too. And I think there's this misnomer. And I think, listen, do I think that U.S. aid and 50% of what they were doing was, yeah, I do. Do I think what's happening in Minnesota bad? Yeah, I do. Do I think it's limited to Democrats? No, I don't.
And I'm gonna be +1, Gimbel on that one. And I remember Ted Cruz, I think, came on to All In, and he was kind of very negative on Doge, not because he didn't think we needed it, because he didn't think it was going to work, and he was so prescient because he basically said, all of you people love to virtue signal and use the term fraud and waste, okay, as if there's just a line item that says fraud and waste. He said that is not how it works. What happens is that on the other side of what you would consider to be fraud and waste, there is a very good-looking, respectable politician, right or left, who will defend to the death, to the mat, the legitimacy of that payment. So it is much worse than having things that are obvious, because as you've seen, Brandon Gill from Texas was really raking some of these Minnesotans and some of the Somalis over the coal about this, about the fraud in like autism and with the daycare and with transportation.
Right.
People were defending it. And so I just think that I agree with Tom that this is not a one-sided problem, but this is why I'm so disheartened that someone like Elon Musk, who I consider to be somewhat apolitical, and he tried to go in there and he got expelled just as hard by the right and Trump as he did by the left. Like, what do you think about that, Al?
Well, here, let me just go back to the prior issue, because I think, again, one of the other disagreements Tom and I have about a lot of these kind of issues is this idea of an equalization argument where you both sides everything. Is that, well, I don't like what Trump did with the plane, or I don't like this account in Venezuela. The beauty of the U.S. to me is that we get to run 50 different experiments across 50 different states. And we've talked about this before. If you look at California, New York, Illinois, all of the blue states, the Democratic states, basically over the last 10 years, or 20, actually over the last 20 years, just to correct my stats, on average, they've doubled their spending per capita and they've lost population. And so there is a difference into how these states operate.
Yeah, but it's going to be cyclical, because now you've got this flood of people going into Florida, and where Florida is going to be in 20 years. Florida used to be, what percentage of it was over the age of 50 or over the age of 60 20 years ago? Now you're getting young families that are going with a public school system that isn't that great, and you're going to need more resources for those people and young families, and it's not going to happen overnight. But there is a cyclical nature to this whole thing.
Well, I'm sure we will figure out a way to mess it up here over the next 30 or 40 years. But this is not a short-term both sides thing. It's easy to say, but there's a reason people are fleeing in droves from Chicago, New York, LA, and San Francisco to come to Dallas, Austin.
I wonder if COVID we'll never know, but I wonder if COVID had never happened.
It would definitely have happened much slower. But I think a lot of the deficit issues that we have are because of these transfer payments. And what I mean by that, just people don't understand, is that when the hospice care system in California or the autism centers in Minnesota, these are just transfer payments from the federal government. The state is dispersing them. The federal government is actually paying them. That's not even included in the state deficits, which is why they get away with it. Despite that, at some point over the next 5 to 10 years, these states are going to be on the verge of bankruptcy. And namely, it's the states I talked about. And at that point, we're going to have a real issue in this country, because you're going to have to decide, do the residents of Florida and Texas, do they want to pretty much bankroll the residents of California, Illinois, and New York? And what you have is you have two sets of policies working. So these are not both sides. It's not, well, one side's bad, the other side's bad. It's, hey, look, one set of experiments seems to be working. The other set of experiments seems to be failing desperately. So what's going on?
Well, okay. So I think that was why Chamath tweeted what he tweeted. So I guess I would basically ask you, Tom, I know you're not a Newsom guy, but let's just assume he is the nominee.
Yeah.
And we know, for what Al just said and what Chamath tweeted, we know what the track record, the actual track record in California would be. What do you say at that point if you're at the DNC and it's a Newsom? Like, how do you defend it if you have to? Or do you say, no, I might be open to voting the other way?
This is the challenge of doing something 3 years in advance, right? Is we don't know where the United States is going to be, how Iran's going to turn out, what's going on, how we're going to handle the cartels in Mexico, so on and so forth, and where everything goes. I think that if you have a candidate who's really flawed, which most of them are, but a really flawed candidate like Newsom, and the only thing is vote for change, I think that doesn't work.
He does have
if you
great
have a
hair,
candidate
though,
who
right?
can move the moderates, they can get the Ravin Gandhi over because you say, a true fiscal conservative, social liberal, I'll go that way. And he seems like a decent person. You need that guy, whether it's Shapiro or Rahm or whomever.
Have you seen the footage of him where he had to do the mea culpa and admit publicly that he slept with the wife of his campaign manager?
I know that he did it, but I haven't seen that.
Oh, it's so painful. Oh my God. You go on to X, and when you watch it, and I only bring it up because you say if you find out he's like a good guy,
Yeah.
and there's so many things where everybody knows Trump has, endless baggage, but a lot of people never hear, for instance, that a lot of that stuff is pretty contagious. And
Oh.
so I wonder when that stuff, starts to play. But
Well, I'm with Tom. I just think it's so hard to predict early what happens because you're going to have 10 plus candidates on the Democratic side. Who knows what happens on the Republican side? Once he gets out there, once Newsom gets out there outside of his home state, and he to his credit has been willing to go into unfriendly territory, and he holds his own. Like,
yeah, he had the podcast. Yeah.
I'm not a fan of
He's a
Newsom.
skilled politician. There's absolutely no doubt about it.
One of the numerous times Ram yelled at me when he came on, what was the first time? I think it was when I said, listen, would a President Emmanuel keep the border closed? Because I think that whoever the nominee is, people are going to have to answer for what Biden did. And
I just can't figure out why the Democrats can't, if they, and Rahm's starting to do it, but he just, he falls just short of it on certain things. It's like, if they could just acknowledge the basic things.
I don't know if you've seen this chart, Tom, but this is literally a chart about immigration. And over Biden's term, you had material percentages of the population of these countries come across the border, where you've got 8% of Nicaragua, 7% of Cuba, 6% of Haiti, 5% of Honduras, 3% of Guatemala and Venezuela. Like, I can't believe that this is actually true.
It
And
is.
I'm going to show you guys two other slides about current polling. There's our CNN polls. And here, and this is last week. So this is knowing everything we know about ICE. GOP is polling even better as it relates to border security.
For sure.
And one would think that with all of the people screaming about ICE, that they would have dented that, but they have not, which tells me that there is some support right there. My question is, what Democrat, Tom, can be trusted at this point to acknowledge the crushing error that we just talked about and to fight the AOCs and the fringe who are going to say, even if you get elected as a moderate, open the border?
I think the right candidate, and there have been people who've said this, is how is Trump doing on border security? I would say great. If you ask me how his utilization of ICE is, I'd say not great. And I think those are two very different things.
I agree with you. I agree with you, but that I'm still getting to the point about the polling. The polling
answers their phone and answers the polls anyways. I mean, let's just start there.
But by the way, I think you're glossing over the point that isn't all of the energy on the Democratic side in the Ro Khanna AOC, wing of the party, the far left. The idea of a moderate Democrat, could that even come out? Is that even possible?
I mean, I think in it's hard. It's hard. I think about Illinois and our own. We have a senatorial campaign going right now.
Raja Krishnamurthy, baby.
Raja, I was at a breakfast with Raja yesterday, right? And I think I don't put him in the AOC camp at all. At all. I think in this day and age, he has a level-headed thought on a lot of issues. Do I agree with him on 100% of the things? I don't. But I think that he's a level-headed politician.
Let's think about what being level-headed looks like today. And here, what you see is a Gallup poll. This is very apolitical. How much pride do you have in being an American? Okay. And you see it's pretty high on the Republican side. And starting in about 2016, right, when Obama finished and Trump came in, it plummets. Today, 36% of Democrats report being proud of being an American. And the second thing that I want to show you, this says choose your path. And there's two images. One is of a Medal of Honor recipient during the State of the Union, kind of representing, pride in America. And the other is you have two members of, I think, the squad.
That's Omar on the left and Talib on the right.
And I find it offensive what that part of the party represents. And I know you do too, Tom, but my question for you is about the first slide, pride in being American. Do you think the nominee is going to be able to say the things that I believe, like this isn't an evil country?
I think we're in a really difficult situation where the person that could win the general can't win the primary.
That's the system, though. That
Right?
ain't changed.
That is the system. I think that the knock that Democrats aren't patriotic is a load of crap. It's a load.
I don't. Okay, hold on, but just tell me what the chart reported.
But the chart is. I mean, you know as well as I do that the people who participate in the polls are on the extremes. It's like the people who donate to political campaigns are usually on the extremes. That's why the middle gets squeezed out, and that's why, of course.
But Tom, that's a little bit of a cop out, though, right? Because I agree with you. You're right about that, but on a relative basis, over the last 4, 5, 10 years, it hasn't changed that much. The people who are responding.
Yeah, you're probably right on that. I just think that it's. Is there that sentiment? There is. Is it ridiculous? 100%. But
here's my dark horse. Just to throw it in there on the Democratic side is Fetterman. And
hey, no way.
Not even a shot.
More likely on the Republican side.
Well, he's been just saying common sense things that other Democrats are afraid to and unwilling to say. Things like these 80-20, 90-10 issues, that voter ID should be the law. It's pretty basic. That taking out Maduro and taking out Khomeini probably is good for America and good for the world. It's common sense stuff. That the border was a mess. And if there was a Democrat, and this is what we asked Ram, if there was a centrist Democrat that would come out and I think speak to these kind of mainstream 80-20 issues, I think they would get a lot of traction.
Okay, so Tommy, what we see here is, to Al's point, these are the activities where one needs an ID to do
I'm with you on this. I'm with you guys 100%.
Okay, and where you don't need an ID is to vote.
For people just listening, there was a long list of activities where you need an ID.
And now there's all this disinformation.
Ridiculous.
And there is something called the SAVE Act, which is currently in the Senate. It's already passed the House. People are saying, oh, if you're a woman and you're going to get married, it's going to screw things up. This is myth versus fact. If you did get married, accepts many forms of ID. You don't have to carry your birth certificate around. And my point, Gimbel, is that you are with us on this.
100%.
But here's the thing. Let me ask you this. I think that this is going to be voted on in the next few months. I think that Trump is going to get Mike Johnson to go nuclear and throw out the filibuster. And I think that they are going to pass this thing with 50 or 51 votes. And I think there is going to be protests like you have never seen in this country, with all these hysterics saying, we told you Trump is a dictator and now you can't vote and he's disenfranchising people. My question to you, as someone who is still left of center, but yet agrees with, say, where we are on this, will you at that point say, that's a challenge to democracy, that he actually passed that thing with, like, say, 52 votes?
No, yeah, listen, I think it should be passed. I think you should have to show it. I think we should partner with a technology company and and have a fingerprint or a retina scan and be able to do it. I think every American should have to pay, at least literally when I say this, $1 in income tax a year, and it should be part of your tax return, voting, right? And I think there's a lot of things we could do. Listen, I can now do global entry on my phone and bypass a line of 500 people that would took 2 seconds to do. We got the COVID vaccine in 2 seconds. We can't get voting done electronically in a way that will follow the laws where everybody vote. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Tommy, why haven't the Democrats done it?
Yeah, the reason would be where you're leading me to.
Well, it's because
Not leading you anywhere. Not leading you anywhere.
is it because of the grift of Trump and the plane, or what was it?
No. The grift of Trump and the plane was to counteract the Democrats.
No. I
stealing
just
votes.
want Tommy to just answer simply.
They want
in
more
an
votes. Listen,
age-
it's been on the Democrats have the whole theory has been we give out welfare, we give out money to get votes, and you bring people in, and the Democrats open the border and they vote Democrat to keep the doors open. I 100% agree that is the reason that the political. Now, why the progressives think that, I have no idea. When they're taking away benefits from people who need it, who are American
I
citizens.
just want our listeners to understand that this you just heard from a super smart guy who is still fairly against the president, who's still a bit left of center. And he, like me, believes, show me an incentive and I will show you an outcome. And
Yep.
when you have an incentive where you say you can cross the border at an industrial scale and get free shit and free SNAP and free things, it is going to force your thumb on the scale in these blue states. And Musk said, this is what is behind it. And I hate conspiracies. I don't think this is a conspiracy. I think this is absolutely why they're against a voter ID.
Listen,
And
there's the consistent theory has always been, okay, the Republicans give tax breaks to benefit their voter base. The Democrats give away welfare and benefits to benefit their voter base. That's always been how it's been viewed for the 50 years I've been alive and well before that. And so in this situation, it drives down that narrative of why else would the political establishment want that when they're supposed to serve their legal constituents? And listen, I'm for amnesty in a lot of cases. But the point of the matter is you got to move people over, and there's good, hardworking people. And I'm also under the okay that, you know what, there's certain levels of illegal aliens that are right for this country, that it works, and they have kids that end up getting educated, and there's something to that. Okay, all of that, but they shouldn't be able to vote.
I do believe Bill Clinton said it right, that ultimately it's the economy, stupid. And so my view is, if the geopolitical landscape stabilizes, then for the midterms and in 2028, ultimately it's going to be, what is the state of the economy and affordability and how are people feeling? So where do we think we are?
Well, I think there's two things. I think number one, what this economy has shown us is that the economy and the stock market have become mutually exclusive. Historically, it's never been that way. And the big indicator there is jobs. If there's a healthy job market, no matter what unemployment is, and obviously it's going to be lower in a healthy job market where there's more mobility of work and it rises wage naturally. We had an unnatural wage inflation due to COVID, right? You used to be able to get somebody in a major metropolitan area with a college degree to come in right out of college, 21, 22, 23 years old, and take an entry-level job and do for 10, 12 bucks an hour while they were looking for a career. Okay. That number went to $19 an hour in 12 months. It's insane what's happened. And now you have Juliana Stratton running for senator who wants a $25 minimum wage. It's insanity. Okay. So you have the job market and you have the stock market. Stock companies are doing well because of deregulation and knowing that Trump's going to continue to do this. And now you have a war that's going to fuel the Lockheed Martins and the Boeing stock, and that's going to drive up. And then, so I think they're just very different. And people still, inflation is real. It is a real problem.
I for sure believe the midterms and the general are going to go as the economy goes. I don't think that there's any doubt of that. But what I want to talk about and this is related to the midterms, but beyond the economy, because I think that a good thing, an insight I can get from Gimbel is one of the things that, Tom, that pushed me right of center is as I started to see more data around policies that made me feel good, but then I realized didn't work.
Yep.
And I think that's, I want to show you just a couple things. And this is related to education because we're all like super passionate about that. I'm going to just show you this quote, which is, if your child becomes a reader, about 80% of the education job is already done. That's my honest assessment after working in education for over 30 years. Everything else is secondary. Most parents think science education is important. Yes, it is. But if you can't read the biology book, you're not going to learn biology. Reading is the meta skill that enables all other skills. History requires reading, science requires reading, even math increasingly requires reading. The child who reads voraciously will figure everything else out. Now, with that in mind, let's take a look at this. A chart of the emptiest 20 Chicago schools.
This is ridiculous. It is insane. They should all be thrown out on their ass. It's such a bunch of crap.
Right here on the screen, you have 20 Chicago public schools. And on average, they are utilized 11%. Okay. The top one, Douglas. This is a school that I've been to that is designed for 900 kids. There are 27 kids in that school. They're spending $93,000 per kid. The percent of students proficient in reading in that school is 0. And you see a lot of zeros on that chart. And to Al's point about if you can really both sides this issue, okay, I want to show you this, which is another CPS data, which is here you've got since 2018, Chicago Public School has added 6,343 employees while they lost 35,000 students. Okay. And you're an entrepreneur, Gimbel, and it's like you may say it's ridiculous, throw them all out on their ass, but this is a one party state. Okay. Like I'm giving money to all the mayoral candidates. I'm trying to figure out a way to get the less bad version of this. But are you with me that there is an element to us who were left of center for many years where a lot of the things that precipitated this made us feel so good, like we were doing the right things? The shit hasn't worked.
Oh, I think they being Chicago Teachers Union, seeing far left politicians, are actually doing the most racist thing in the world, and that's oppressing people in poverty and not allowing them to get out. And I think that they're doing it in not just Chicago and big cities around the country. And it's I believe that education is the great equalizer, which goes off of your point of reading, is that we should be incentivification, right? You've been talking about that a lot during the show, and that we need to incentivize people to do well in school and to get them out. It's the only thing that will allow for systemic change.
But how
And
do we do that? I mean,
What?
I agree with that, but how do we make it something more than a
You
platform?
see, the things that people don't want to talk about, right? Is you have to have a meritocracy versus pure union teachers, right? And how you do collective bargaining and how you reward people. I do think there's a difference between raising people or educating people who are in poverty versus people that are not. There's a difference between a 2-parent household and a one. It's hard to get people to get their kids to school on time if they got to get to work or they're going to get fired. There's a lot of social understanding that doesn't begin to get addressed.
Okay, well, I'm glad we're here now, which is things people don't want to talk about. And I really, if you would have asked me why I was a Democrat for 20 years, my basic gut answer would be racism. I'm not white. I know that there's a lot of oppression in this country. I grew up next to Black and Hispanic people in Waukegan. Like, I know that this stuff exists. So my gut feeling was, well, I know that it seems to be like more the KKK, David Dukes were on the right. So fuck that. Like, I'm going to be a guy on the left because I know that I'm on the right side of history. But here's what I want to show you. And this is 100% in the realm of things that people don't ever want to talk about. Okay. And I'm going to show you this first stat, Gimbel. And this is interracial violent crime. Okay. And what you see is the different races and crime from one race against the other. And then you have a TV camera. And inside the TV camera, which is really the data I always saw, there was 59,778 incidents of white on Black crime. This is in the year 2018. My general view, honestly, if you would have asked me in 2018, frankly, in 2021, what the breakdown was, I would say, of course, white people do a lot more crime than Black people. Well, what this image shows is that when you look to the left of the camera and you have Black on white crime, which is 547,000 incidents, or black on Hispanic, which is 112,000, or Hispanic on white, 365,000. The point is that I was not aware of these things. I was just simply not aware that something like this was going on. Like, I last year was a co-chair of the United Negro College Fund Gala. Like, I am super into this issue. And what I know amongst my black friends is this bothers them. And this is the
Sure,
kind of
because
thing.
it starts. I'm on the board of directors for Start Early, the former ounce of prevention, and we help with early childhood education in inner city areas. And so, and I'm not saying I'm great because of it. I'm just saying I have a little bit of insight. And you don't start fixing a problem at the the weed that's 8 feet tall. You got to start pruning the dirt, and that is with kids. Zero. I was having a conversation with somebody who supports a charity of helping high school kids go to college. And I said, if you supported my charity of 0 to 5 years, we wouldn't even need yours.
Well, so let's talk about root cause, Gimbel, and someone who, I don't know if you're into this guy, Tom
I
Sowell.
know.
The black family survived centuries of slavery and generations of Jim Crow, but it has disintegrated in the wake of the liberals' expansion of the welfare state. Most black children grew up in homes with two parents during all that time, but most grow up with one
Because
parent
there was a
today.
tax incentive created in the 70s for that.
And I
Well,
can't say this. People, they lose their minds and they say, "Oh, it's correlation, not causation." And Tommy,
But
you
that's the
are.
hand we're dealt, Ravin. This is where we're at. So
But
we
so
can,
what do we do? And a guy like me who wants to solve things, the reason why I've gone further to the right is because you can't get an audience on the left with this. Why can't we get people who are in the middle to say, this policy clearly hasn't worked? If I was an African American family, I would be pissed.
because everybody's got an agenda. You know that as well as I do. The people that go on CNBC and talk about investments, they have an agenda. People that run for office, they have an agenda. The guy or woman that runs for the school board, they have an agenda because they run a hedge fund and they want to get money from a pension
So what
fund and
is
they
the
need to be
left's
able to save
agenda?
it.
What is the
What-
left's agenda?
Well, I think the left's agenda is we know better than you do. What that old school thought of we know better what to do with your money than you do, and so we'll run the social services and the education. The results say otherwise. Why are they afraid to admit that? I don't know why they're afraid to admit their mistakes. I
Well,
don't
Tom,
have an answer to that.
Tom, let me push you just a little further on this. In that we've talked about this idea of you toying with maybe running for mayor and supporting folks that are running for mayor of Chicago.
Yep.
And I think my push to you has been, okay, let's assume you can win. What do you actually do that could actually fix the problem?
We just saw, looking at the screens that we just saw and knowing as you do the data, and you get elected mayor.
And it's a one-party state, and the Chicago Teachers Union has tremendous control.
These all okay, Al. So the problems and everything you just said is 100% true. So that means we should never fight it again. Let's fold up our tents and move to Florida.
Well,
No, I haven't.
I told you my solution. That's what
I mean, I
did.
don't agree with
told-
that. Now,
my
the
solution is,
counter
I think-
argument is until
I-
Chicago files bankruptcy, you're not going to be able to get out from under the pension problems. And those are the big. If we're talking purely on fiscal problems, the pensions are a real problem. And until we start saying we're going to run that you're going to grandfather people in and then change it for people going forward, that nothing will even begin to get fixed, right? Then you have to look and say, analyze the job data that the slide you showed, Ravin, with teachers, employees added and population going down. That's a real issue. It needs to be front and center again and again and again and again and again in how you push this agenda. And then you need to figure out a way to take the mountain to Muhammad because he ain't coming to the mountain. Okay. And you got to there's nothing that kills me more than people whose kids are in private school and they give away 10 scholarships a year and they bring a kid into this world and think that's going to change it. If you were really a liberal and believe that, you'd take your private school and you'd move it to the poor neighborhood and you'd make your kids bus there. Because at the end of the day,
you're now getting at the area that I would do, which is I used to literally think that in general, there was a racist element to policies that were right of center, and there was an empathetic or humane bent to the policies left of center. I legitimately thought that. And I believe most of my smart liberal friends literally believe this. And I'm simply here to try to gently say, I don't know that it's working. And in fact,
I don't believe that to be true. I agree with you 100%.
and there was a great quote by Wesley Hunt. He's a black congressman from Texas. And he uses that famous term, the racism of low expectations. When you hear about Chuck Schumer saying that people can't get IDs because they don't know how to do it, or you can't get money if you're married because we know that in that case you're going to have like too much of an advantage. Like this is radioactive stuff, and I think that most of my liberal friends, if they saw the data that they've probably never seen, they would say, "Oh my God, I thought I was on the right side of history."
So Conflict of Visions, we brought up that book. That to me is my favorite Thomas Sowell book. And effectively, he just lays out the difference in views between people, and it tends to frame the political divide. But on one side, you have a constrained view that says, okay, I have a certain set of resources that I need to deploy, and here's what I can accomplish, and I need to create good policy and good incentives. On the other side, you have this unconstrained view, which is effectively virtue signaling, because the idea is we're going to create this utopian idea. We're going to feel good about it. We don't actually think it's going to work, or maybe we do. It never works.
Yeah,
And-
but Al, what you just said, it's great from a policy wonk, ethereal, philosophical perspective. That shit doesn't sell. But I'll tell you what does sell. What sells is aspirational. And when you go to a group of people and you say, do you believe the following things about yourself? Of course you don't. And what we are looking for in this country is capitalism and self-interest and being selfish and getting rich. I think that's what most people want. That's how you sell it.
Look at the magnet schools in Chicago. They're ranked in the top schools in the whole state of Illinois, and this mayor says they're bad, they're racist, we're not going to do them. We should be expanding the magnet school program in Chicago, and we should be doing things like that that work, that benefit the children. I mean, what we've lost sight of is, well, we can't lay off teachers. What's best for the children?
So, Gimbel, I think a good way to kind of try to wrap this up is this. We've had a pretty good discussion here about a lot of third rail stuff that you do not normally hear about, okay, ever. You know, like even on a podcast. And this was good because we did get a little bit of both sides on each issue. And it's amazing to me that you are pretty much kind of like where we are on a lot of these really polarized issues.
I try to tell Al I'm not a Democrat.
But
he just hates Trump.
Yeah, but you voted for Kamala.
It's fine.
You voted for Kamala, right, in 2024.
Yeah.
And my question is that if now it is 2028 and it is, let's just say it's a Josh Shapiro, okay, who you like, do you think Josh Shapiro, if he was on this podcast, would be able to answer any of the questions that I just showed him? I think he would run off the podcast immediately and have an audio problem, and he would be gone.
He would do what Rom did. He'd answer 50% of it, and he'd divert the topic.
So then how does a guy as smart as you, a self-made guy, still want to vote for him?
That's a tough question. Look at that setup.
Because, you know, I'll tell you, you get people avoiding the answer on one side and lying about things on the other side. And I can't go down that MAGA train. The blind loyalty.
I want the because lying. Is that what I heard? Lying?
Yeah, lying.
Okay, so lying is the biggest problem.
Yeah, I got a problem with the lying. And listen, all politicians lie. It's just so factual. And the problem I have now more than anything, and it's always, well, your guy did this, so my guy can do that, and my guy's doing this, so your guy can do that.
But Tommy, here's my question: if lying is a character issue, and there's been a lot of like character debates, but when you are utterly agreeing that at scale, the policies that, let's just say, Josh Shapiro currently represents, or frankly, far more like the AOCs, but let's just pick a Shapiro or a Newsom. When you agree that these policies aren't working and they are hurting the people that we want to kind of try to help the most economically, job fiscally, but yet you'll vote to keep hurting it because of the word lying. My question is the lying, and I stipulate there is lying that's coming from MAGA and from the right, but is that lying from a policy perspective hurting anything nearly as bad?
Maybe not. But what I will tell you is that the change of getting people to be able to, the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, and elevating out of poverty, is going to be done on a local level, not on a federal level.
Okay.
And the expression that all politics are local. And so I think that the issues we have with the president is how it impacts the social fabric of the country and how internationally. And I think Obama was a big swing and a miss internationally, and it got us to this point. So I do believe that fundamentally. On
So,
the flip side, I
well,
think the social fabric of this country is deteriorating, and I think that's a real problem.
Well, when you guys both run for politics, and whether it's local or national, you can hire me as your policy wonk to sit in the background and quote Thomas Sowell, and I'll
Good deal.
talk to you about the constraints and why I don't believe what you're saying, Tom, is actually actionable. At some point, you need to kind of let the system collapse on itself and then rebuild and make it better with better incentives.
well, I'll tell you, Gimbel, I was, as you, a two-term Obama passionate voter, and I felt so good about myself and the country because I thought that he was like the pivot we finally wanted. And only recently, I think I've talked about this, the podcast called the Great American Math Crisis with a liberal named Derek Thompson. And in that podcast, he unwrapped, unfortunately, during Obama's second term, a law called ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, which basically took away all the testing requirements for No Child Left Behind, which ushered in this era of accommodations and no testing and SAT optional and promoting all of these kids through school. And in some cases, even to be math majors in college, and they don't even know how to do remedial math. Things like that are where I say, if the guy that I was so passionate for and gave money to and defended actually created some of these negative things from a destroying merit perspective, and concurrently we had the rise of all the indignation and wokeism and the justification for why this country is evil. I'm sorry, but yeah, there's lying and yeah, there's stuff that happens that I don't like, but I'm now optimizing for the country I want my sons to live in and my grandkids. And I promise you, no one in 50 years is going to know about X or Y like lie. They're going to care about the policy that impacts the literacy of the nation, the numeracy of the nation, the GDP of the nation. So that's my sales pitch. I don't know if I'm selling you, but that's how I look at it.
Well,
No, I think it's a great point, and I think that I can go on for another episode and a half probably on Obama selling out to Pelosi and selling out about people of color for national health care and choosing the wrong thing that didn't help anybody elevate to the next level. And so I think you're
well,
100%
Obama, I do think we all are unified in this idea that America is the greatest country in the history of the world. There's still tremendous opportunity for smart, young, hardworking folks to excel. And let's all try to do our part to make that continue for the next 100+ years.
And that is a beautiful way to end. And I want to put this on the screen, which I've been sending all over the place. And it's a tweet and it says, I'm long everything. America will fix its problems. There will be no war with China. Wars in Europe and the Middle East will end. We will solve housing. We will solve addiction. We will fix Social Security and the debt problem. California will wake up and get out of its own way. We will legalize building again. Billionaires will build great public projects. No doomerism. The world will get richer, safer, and more peaceful. More people will get medicine and money and buy cool shit. I am long everything, and I'm certainly long this country. So that is a wrap here on episode number 20, Forged in America. So keep liking, sharing, keep giving Tom Gimbel a lot of love in the comments. And thanks, Tom, and we will see you guys all next time.
good to be with you, boys.